Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Fox Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if I might ask for the unanimous consent of the House to substitute the amended bill that was presented and adopted by the House last week for the existing bill and withdraw the existing bill, National Honours Bill, and replace it with the amended bill.
Very well. It is assumed that the member has gotten consent. If not, speak now. Member for Marco City rose to his feet. Chair recognizes member for Marco City.
Speaker, I don't rise to dissent from what the Honourable Member for Fox Hill is saying, but in his
microphone.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not rise to dissent from what the Honourable Member for Fox Hill is requesting, but as he rightly prefaced in his request, he was asking for the unanimous consent of the House. And I just want to say that, of course, is under Rule 51. And I rise only to say that this should not be taken as pro forma. This should not be taken as just by the way. When the House requires unanimous consent, as a courtesy, at the very least, I would ask that persons have prior words to discuss the unanimous consent, and this not be done on our feet in this way. Having said that, I do not dissent from it, but I just ask for the courtesy in the future of being consulted beforehand.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Fox Hill.
Obliged, Mr. Speaker, and I accept the member's statement. I then so move for the withdrawal of the existing National Honours Bill, substitution of the amended version that was adopted last week by the House. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Do we have a seconder? Order that the bill be brought up. It's moved and seconded that the National Honours Bill, be withdrawn and replaced with a new National Honours Bill that will be debated, moved and debated today. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The resolution is agreed and the motion is passed. Member for Fox Hill.
I'll need the bill back. Let's see what it says.
Member for, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Perhaps you take the bill back.
I'm sorry, had you called second readings?
No, I didn't call second reading. Just take the bill back to the member if you... So this is the formal first reading of the bill. First reading? Oh, of the bill?
This bill?
Of this bill, of the new bill.
The new bill. Oh, you have to read. Oh, I see. You have to read it. I see. Okay. I now so move. I move the first reading of a bill, bill for an act to repeal and replace the National Honours Act 2007 and the National Heroes Act 2007. Move.
Do we have a second? It has been moved and seconded the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the National Honours Act 2007 and the National Heroes Act 2007. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to repeal and replace the National Honours Act 2007 and the National Heroes Act 2007.
Sorry. Further first reading of bills. There are none. Second reading and committal of bills. Chair recognizes the only member for Fox Hill.
Bill back. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the rules call for a day's intervention between first and second readings, so I'm again asking for the unanimous consent of the House to proceed with the second reading and committal of this bill. Mr. Speaker, on the 10th of January 2016, which is next year, we will be marking the 49th anniversary of majority rule in the Bahamas. And there are a number of public functions that are being promoted or planned in connection with that event. On the evening of the 9th of January, it is planned for the public square a concert celebrating the music of the late Freddie Munnings Sr. and his many songs and tributes to the city of Nassau, which is now celebrating its 54th anniversary as a city. You will know that in law, what was once Hog Island was changed by Act of Parliament in 1962 and renamed Paradise Island. So up to that time, Nassau and the Bahamas was the way the Bahamas was promoted as a tourist destination. And many of our musicians, including Freddie Munnings and Blind Blake and George Simonet, all wrote songs about the city of Nassau and what a great time you could have in Nassau. One of the songs that Freddie Munnings sang was that before leaving New York, we had a wonderful talk about Little Nassau. And many, many songs which celebrate the city of Nassau. Indeed, his son, Raphael Munnings, in 1971, released a song called Funky Nassau. And that song recently celebrated, I believe, its 50th anniversary, 40th anniversary as a song. So on the evening of the 9th of January, we hope to gather here with a public concert in tribute to the life of Freddie Munnings, who was one of, not a politician, but one of the civic leaders, musicians, trade unionists that promoted freedom for our people. In his establishment now that no longer exists called the Cat and the Fiddle, he had a room called the Ghana Room. And in that room, many of the famous changes that helped to plan and bring about majority rule were planned and executed in that room. So we're going to pay tribute to him. And the next morning, we hope to gather at the mausoleum of the late Sir Lyndon Pindling in the St. Agnes Cemetery to lay a wreath to mark to observe Majority Rule Day. He, being the father of the nation, the man who was the first premier of the nation under majority rule. Now, the holiday of the 10th of January, 1967, was one of a number of public holidays, one of two public holidays, that were advocated by the Cultural Commission, headed then by the late Winston Saunders. And they reviewed a number of matters and made certain recommendations to the government. One of them was that the 10th of January 1967 should be observed as a public holiday. Another was that there ought to be a day set aside to celebrate the lives of those people who had made seminal contributions to the building up of our society. That was National Heroes Day. And they recommended that while the observance for Discovery Day or the 12th of October should continue, then the second Monday, the 12th of October should be celebrated as continued to be observed as Discovery Day, but that the public holiday would be the second Monday in October, which would be observed as National Heroes Day. And so National Heroes Day has become a part of the law and is a public holiday, and we've accomplished our promise in that direction by signing into law, and the holiday is now celebrated on the 10th of January as Majority Rule Day. Now, many of these changes came about not because of the formal recommendations of the Cultural Commission, but because of the work of a body which was called the National Heroes Day Committee, which came out of an effort which began in 1990 to create a National Heroes Day holiday. And we thought at the time that it should be around the time of the passing of the late Sir Milo Butler, who most of us believe was the quintessential Bahamian champion, who before the age of party politics was leading the fight for the freedom of our people in this country. Amongst those who gathered on those first occasions were the Member of Parliament for Long Island, and leading the Red Mass on that occasion was the Reverend Canon Sebastian Campbell, or Reverend Father Campbell as he then was, myself, and Terence Bethel. And then later, this group of people morphed into a committee which included Max Turner, who is the father of Justice Bernard Turner, Code Smith, the former Member of Parliament. Father Sebastian Campbell became its chair. Mr. Freddie Munnings Sr., the Reverend C.B. Moss, Ms. Vonda Moss, Freddie Munnings Jr., and Mr. Athama Bowe. And together, as Father Campbell reminded the Select Committee recently, we've been working for some 25 years to accomplish both National Heroes Day and national honors. I made reference to the report of the Cultural Commission headed by the late Winston Saunders. One of the recommendations made by the Saunders Committee was that we needed to have a system of national honors for our country. In the Select Committee report, they are referred to as British honors, but of course they are Bahamian honors, except that it is quite anachronistic in this day and age to be giving out Order of the British Empire, which doesn't exist, or Member of the British Empire, which doesn't exist. But those are what we have. And my old friend Loftus Roker used to always have a bit of fun with his colleagues in the cabinet. He used to say, if you all don't want to give them out, I have plenty of people in North Andrews who are willing to take them, and you just let me have them, and I'll use all the allocations up. Because the way it works, Mr. Speaker, is that each of the societies, the Order of the British Empire and the various divisions, St. Michael and St. George, all have allocations for each of the Commonwealth countries. And there are numbers of that are allocated to the various countries that they can allocate across the various societies and divisions. So you have, for example, up at the top, a Governor General gets what's a Grand Commander of St. Michael and St. George, which comes with a knighthood. And then there are various grades which go down. The question is then, or the advice was, that we needed to do away with these honors and to have honors which were of a Bahamian genesis, which reflected the realities of a modern Bahamas. It's been a long time in coming. And after all these years, we're now at the point where the design work has been done, the regulations have been drafted, the bill has been now amended before the House to improve on what actually now exists in law, and we are ready to proceed. The Select Committee request made a unanimous report, and that report has indicated that there is a wish for this bill, should it be passed by Parliament, to come into force on the 1st of March next year, for the first announcements with regard to those people who would get honors to be made on Independence Day of next year, and for the first conferments to be done on National Heroes Day next year. And this is a part, Mr. Speaker, of a very important part of nation building. It will help to strengthen the ethos that is Bahamian and help to fix in the minds, we hope, of the generation that leads today, but certainly in the generation that we're passing off to, that this land which they have is a valued piece of ground which should be defended with their lives and to which they ought to be dedicated, united as one people in love and service. This is another part of the job of nation building. You can think of many names, Mr. Speaker, who have made contributions to the development of this country and who deserve to be recognized for those contributions. And this is not only politicians or political figures, but people who make civic contributions from across the country, from north to south. And this bill, in the way it has been amended and the way it has been designed, is designed to allow for those people from north to south, from across all walks of life, to have an opportunity to be honored by their country. There's even in the bill, a society of honor, which is dedicated to young people in particular. It is a medal which can only be given to those under the age of 25. We felt that this was an important signal to send to the young people of this country to help fix them to this nation as important to them and as something to which they ought to dedicate their lives and help to build the future for this country. I think back and often talk of Sir Clifford Darling. Sir Clifford Darling, who was born in the 1930s in a remote settlement of the Bahamas called Chester's Acklins. Chester's Acklins, I'm not sure whether it still exists today. It exists today. And it is still a remote. It is alive. But well, it is alive as well. Alive and well. My profound apologies. But the fact is that it is one of the more remote parts of our country. And he began in that settlement and then moved to Nassau. And you ask yourself, what was it in the men of his generation that caused them to feel and think and believe that they could challenge the established order? Not only did they challenge the established order, but they brought the established order to its knees and then became the establishment themselves, to the point where the observation I made when he died was he could not have imagined, when he was born and left Chester's Acklins, that the entire government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas would be arrayed behind his coffin as they took him to his resting place. That would have been an impossibility in his mind when he was born in the 1930s. And yet, he was able to work with other men of his generation to create that possibility. And use his life and the example of so many others of that generation. We don't want to forget the women. And I have to do this because I was speaking to some students in Jamaica at the University of the West Indies campus recently. And I gave all these examples of men who had fought so hard and come from humble beginnings. And our honorary counsel spoke after me and she said, well, I want to give you the story of a woman who was successful and came from humble beginnings and fought and was successful. And I had to say, I get it. I get it. But you have Dame Doris Johnson, who was at the forefront of the fight for women's equality in this country. It is unbelievable that people would argue, or that when you think back at history, that women could not vote in the Bahamas, that actually happened in our lifetime, that women got the vote. And it started because, we're told, because the grandmother of one of our members of Parliament, the Member of Parliament for Seabreeze, after he lost the election, and was saying, if only the women could have voted for me, I would have won the election. And his wife set out to make sure that that was changed in the country. And many women joined the fight. Doris Johnson was the one who actually stood up and made the speech to the recalcitrant members of the House of Assembly, as they were then known. And then that battle was won. And she goes down in history as one of the leaders of the fight for civic rights in this country. So there were men and women who worked to make sure our country is successful and what it is today. Mr. Speaker, we want to inspire this generation to do the same thing. You heard the Minister of Education speak just a few minutes ago as to what are we actually going to do to help imbue in the next generation a sense that this country belongs to them and it's not something that ought to be destroyed, but something that ought to be cherished. When I'm ruminating about the subject, I often say to constituents who speak to me that you look at people who are engaged in these fights and you say to yourself, everyone comes, I'm sure, from reduced circumstances. Their parents are struggling to keep them in school. It's a fight every day to drop them off. I spoke to the grandmother of one of the individuals who's being charged, and she said, I was so concerned about this boy that I brought him to live with me. And I wanted to be sure, even though she lives in Life at Key, she says, I would leave my job and I would go to the school every afternoon. Worked in Life at Key. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Worked in Life at Key. And she would drive to the school to pick him up every afternoon because she believed that you had to be close on this youngster to be sure that no trouble ensued. And that's the extent to which parents are so concerned about the future of their children. And we have to keep at it. And I say, there they are, children fighting, and I wonder if they know what they're fighting for. What are you fighting for? What is it that you are? I could see, Mr. Speaker, if you are going to get $1 million because you had a fight. But here it is, the one thing that you have under your control, your future. That's what you have under your control. Your future is under your control. The school is trying to train your mind so that you can overcome any obstacle in the future. Become as wealthy as you want. Get any job you want. And you go and throw that away for a fight in school, which will bring you nothing but evil and bad things. Nothing good. So we want to inspire them. Mr. Speaker, the regime of the bill is as follows. There is to be an advisory committee, and that advisory committee will be responsible for making recommendations to the Prime Minister for those persons who should receive honors pursuant to this bill. Now, there's a lot of public discussion in the open fora that were conducted in Freeport and in the Bahamas and on radio. And there was discussion within the Select Committee itself on the question of how much should there be political influence on appointments and on the choices which are made for these honors. The reality, though, is that the way our system is constructed is that the executive authority of the country is vested in the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, and to some extent in the Governor General on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen. So appointments are vested in those offices. And that is the regime which is employed in this bill. So, for example, the advisory committee is appointed, and there is consultation with the leader of the opposition. And that's a regime which exists throughout our statute law. That's a regime which exists in the Constitution of the Bahamas. Prime Minister appoints after consultation with the leader of the opposition. That is preserved here. Now, the role of the advisory committee, according to Clause 3 of the bill, is it shall make recommendations to the Prime Minister of persons fit to be conferred with an honor under this Act, shall consult with the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition regarding the nominations, including those made by members of the public for an honor under this Act, shall make investigations as it thinks fit to determine persons living or dead upon whom may be conferred the honor of National Hero in accordance with Section 8, and I'd like to come to Section 8 shortly. And D, report to the Chancellor the results of those investigations. The Chancellor, Mr. Speaker, is the Governor General. And you know, in our system, the Governor General acts on the advice of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. Now, serving the advisory committee will be a secretary to that committee that would be responsible for the executive functions of the committee, and that person will be a public servant. The advisory committee is constituted under the schedule to the bill, and I'll come to its composition shortly. Mr. Speaker, the societies of honor and awards are as followed, and they are delineated in Clause 5 of the bill. There's the Order of National Hero, the Order of the Nation, Order of the Bahamas, the Order of Excellence, the Order of Distinction, the Order of Merit, and the Order of Lignum Vitae, and any other honor constituted by the Governor General by order. And the bill says that there shall be distinguished service medals in honor of exceptional service by Bahamians serving in the public service, the military service, police, fire, and prison services, and uniformed services. Now, you remember that, Mr. Speaker, that under the present regime, I mentioned the civil side of these present honors that we have, but there's also a military side. For example, there's the Colonial Police Medal, and there's the Queen's Police Medal. And I believe we are on notice that the British are shortly going to do away with those honors. And so what we want to do is to have a seamless transfer where there will be service medals available for those who serve in the public service, in the police force, and of course the Defense Force has its own separate regime at the moment. So this is designed to take care of both the civil side and the military side. And I gave the list of the societies starting from National Hero. The bill says that they are in order of that precedence. So in other words, National Hero is the highest, and Order of Lignum Vitae would be at the lowest in descending ranks. And the conferment of the honors generally, the Act says in 7, the Chancellor shall, on the advice of the Prime Minister, after consultation with the Advisory Committee, appoint a person to an order by written instrument bearing the signature of the Chancellor and the seal of the order, and such appointment shall take effect from the date on which the instrument is dated. So the appointment is made by the Chancellor on the advice of the Prime Minister after consultation with this advisory committee. The date of the announcements of awards and conferments in Clause 8. All awards under the Act are to be announced by the Chancellor on the 10th day of July annually. So the announcements will be made on Independence Day. At the moment, the honors are announced on New Year's Eve, and again just before, on the eve of the Queen's birthday, her official birthday, which is celebrated in June. So instead of 2 points of announcements, there will be 1 point, and that point will be with these honors on July the 10th. And then on the second Monday, there will be the ceremony of conferment. Of course, it is possible to postpone the conferment if for any reason the person is unable to accept the award on that day. Clause 9 talks about the conferment of the Order of National Hero. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, inside the committee, I had always assumed that to be a national hero, you had to be dead and gone. I lost that argument, and so the awards can both be posthumously awarded, or that they can also be awarded during the lifetime as an individual. Now, 2 important points I want to make here is if you look at Clause 9(1)(a) and B, it says the following. Someone can be a national hero who, A, is a citizen of the Bahamas, or B, who prior to the 10th July 1973 resided within the Bahamas or any of the islands now within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and but for their death prior to the 10th July 1973 would have been a citizen of the Bahamas. And this was designed to be able to confer an award, if the committee so chooses, on someone like Pompey, who led a slave revolt in the Exumas out of Steventon in the 19th century, and is lionized by the people of that island and of the country, but would not have been a citizen of the Bahamas because, of course, he died before the 10th of July, 1973. That is an important change from this bill, from the bill which is now on the statute books. The other important point in Clause 9 I want to draw to the House's attention is the eligibility criteria. And I'll read those in extenso. In determining the eligibility of a person referred to herein, the advisory committee shall have regard to whether the person, A, has made a seminal contribution to the Bahamas, and which contribution has altered the course of the history of the Bahamas in a positive way. B, has given service to the Bahamas which has been exemplified by visionary and pioneering leadership, extraordinary achievement, and the attainment of the highest excellence, which has redounded to the honor of the Bahamas, and which service and attainment have been acknowledged as a source of inspiration by a significant portion of the nation. Or C, has, through that person's heroic exploits and sacrifice, having gone beyond their personal and historic limitations, contributed to the improvement of the economic, spiritual, and social conditions of the nation as a whole. So this is no fly-by-night honor. This is a significant honor. This is the highest honor, having made a seminal contribution in a positive way to the development of the Bahamas. Clause 10 places in the law what is already in the law, that the second Monday in the month of October shall be commemorated as National Heroes Day and shall be a public holiday. Clause 11 deals with the ownership of the insignia, essentially saying that the intellectual property rights in the insignia shall remain the property of the particular order. And then there's a procedure set down in Clause 12 for the cessation of those orders. And in Clause 13, it is possible to be promoted within an order. So you could be at one division and then be promoted to a higher division within the honor. And then Clause 14 seeks to preserve for the country where people do not accept honors, for example, from enemy states. And it says that if you are offered an honor from another state, that you must seek make a request to the Chancellor, who is the Governor General, and that approval cannot be unreasonably withheld. I'm told that this is a practice in countries around the world. Clause 15 of the bill deal with the offenses thereunder, and there's a general set of penalties under Clause 16. Clause 17 deals with the regulations, and the regulations really set out in the various orders what the criteria are for receiving the honors and the basis upon which they are provided. Clause 18 is the savings clause, and I'd like to read that in extenso. Clause 18.1 says, "For the avoidance of doubt, any honor conferred upon any citizen of the Bahamas by Her Majesty the Queen shall not be extinguished by reason of this act coming into force, or the appointment of such a person to an order, or the award of any other honor prescribed by this act." So this means that those people who have the present Queen's honors will not lose those honors by reason of the fact that these awards come into force and honors are granted under this system. Secondly, it says, "Nothing in this act shall cause a person who has been conferred with an honor awarded by Her Majesty the Queen or any other honor to be ineligible for conferment of an honor under this act." So that goes on to say just what I had said previously. There was a lot of discussion back and forth over this, and it reminds me, Mr. Speaker, of the debate which took place at the time of independence. I'm a committed Republican with a small r. I don't support monarchy. I believe that the country ought to be a republic. I believe it should have been done at the time of independence. But independence was an argument ensued at the time of independence as to what form our Constitution should take. And you'll remember that there were many people who were afraid of separating themselves from the Crown. And the compromise, I believe, I had never spoken to the late Prime Minister about this, but I believe the compromise was that we would proceed to independence in a constitution that basically retained the form that existed prior to 1973, with the exception that we would be responsible for defense and foreign affairs, which we had not been responsible before 1973. And so that there would be no discombobulation in the public generally over the question of any radical shift in the makeup and structure of the government. And this allowed for a peaceful transition from the pre-1973 era to the post-1973 era. And it's worked well. So it is up to the generations which succeed to determine whether or not they go the next step. And there are little ways that we have been seeking in this generation of leaders to move things along one bit farther. And that, today, this act is one such step. Some have suggested, for example, it is possible in law to change the oath which members of Parliament take when they are sworn into this place, so that they, instead of swearing to Her Majesty the Queen, heirs and successors, we can change the oath to say allegiance to the Constitution or some such form of words. Perhaps that's something that might be referred to a commission in the future. But each generation will have a say on how this project, this independence project, moves along. Similarly, there is the question of the continued role of the Privy Council. You know that there are many arguments back and forth over that. Some generation will deal with that question, but it will move the project along. And that is what we are doing today in passing this, this legislation. I'd like to say in a word about the schedule, which refers back to Clause 3 of the bill. And this deals with the constitution and procedure of the advisory committee. Again, the select committee itself was very conscious of trying to be sure that when this bill is passed, when these honors are conferred, that they are seen to be not only official, but authentic and not tinged with partisan politics. And so the idea was not to isolate it from that, but to be sure that there was balance reflected in all of the provisions of the bill, so that the public would have a neutral face to these awards. So the advisory committee shall be appointed by the Prime Minister, shall consist of 10 members, whom, and they shall be as follows. 2 shall be from the Houses of Parliament, and that will mean both the Senate and the House. 1 shall be nominated by the Prime Minister, the other shall be nominated by the Leader of the Opposition. 1 shall be a serving member of the judiciary, nominated by the Chief Justice. 1 shall be nominated by the Commander of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. The other shall be nominated by the Commissioner of Police. 1 shall be nominated by the Council of the College of the Bahamas. And 4 shall be nominated by the Prime Minister after consultation with the Leader of the Opposition, of whom 1 shall be a well-qualified and recognized historian. 1 shall be a person who resides in the northern Bahamas, which includes the islands of Abaco, Berry Islands, Bimini, and Grand Bahama. 1 shall be a person who resides in the central Bahamas, which includes the islands of Andros, Cat Island, Eleuthera, Exuma, and New Providence. And 1 shall be a person who resides in the southern Bahamas, which includes the islands of Acklins, Crooked Island, Inagua, Long Island, Mayaguana, Rum Cay, and San Salvador. And it then goes on, the office of chair or member of the advisory committee shall not be a public office, so this person will not be a public servant for the purposes of Chapter 8 of the Constitution. So the idea is to get a cross-section from across the country and from all walks of life. And this may stand to be corrected. One of the first bills that actually delineates what central, northern, and southern Bahamas actually means. In fact, there was a little bit of a spirited debate about whether New Providence belonged in the central Bahamas or the northern Bahamas. It ended up in the central Bahamas. So that's the regime. Mr. Speaker, some people have argued that, and certainly this was so in some of the public consultations, that our countrymen are so wedded to the British honors, in particular knighthoods, that we have to preserve the possibility for those knighthoods to continue to be conferred through the British honors. Some argued that the Bahamas should do what Barbados has done, and by royal charter create a society in Barbados called the Society of St. Andrew, which confers knighthoods by the government of Barbados, but it's done through the honor system of the Queen. The members of the Select Committee decided not to go that far, but also did not go to the extent of some of the advice which was offered by the National Heroes Day Committee, which was to abolish the possibility of knighthoods and British honors altogether. So what the committee's report indicates is that by policy, it is advising that the government should not, even though the possibility still exists, by policy, the government should not confer those honors on Bahamians, but should use the Bahamian honors. That we have to build up over time its authenticity and acceptance, and we should begin cold turkey with that fact. So in theory, it preserves the possibility if for some future government by policy to continue to administer the British honors. What the report does say, though, specifically, is that in the case where there has been the tradition of the conferment of a knighthood under the existing system on various offices, that would continue. And so the Select Committee has advised that the conferment of a knighthood on the Governor General, on the Office of Governor General, on the Office of the Chief Justice, and the Office of President of the Court of Appeal, or its equivalent for women, would continue to be conferred on those individuals. And so that was the compromise that was struck on this matter. That, Mr. Speaker, takes you through the provisions of the bill, the thinking of the members with regard to this, and why we think it is important for this bill to be passed. And we believe that it ought to come into force on the 1st of March of next year, as I said, and its provisions that the announcements, first announcements, ought to be made. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. And I want to thank Mr. Idris Reed, who has been the primary advisor, doing all of the spade work and collecting all of the data and information from across the region and from other countries as to how these honors are designed and conferred, has been working with the College of Arms in the UK on the design of the insignia, and these will be presented to the committee when the regulations are approved by the Cabinet for its review. There's a lot of work that has to be done to get these in place and to put them in place. And so the 1st of March is coming quickly, and to be able to get the advisory committee in place and the chair and all of its members in place so that we can have the first set of honors next year. Mr. Reed has done a wonderful work, and so has the, I believe she's Ms. Cox from the drafting office, and Mrs. Tina Roy, who were involved in the drafting of the bills, and did great work in trying to get all of the committee's thoughts together. It is left only for me to say, in commending these bills to the House, that we got a unanimous report. It was supported by all members from both sides of the House, and I appreciate all of the hard work and dedication of members who were involved in the process. The member from Grand Bahama, I'm going to call you wrong constituency again, so I'm not going to risk it. Marco City. The member from Marco City joined us by phone a number of times, came into Nassau, but all members took their job quite seriously, reviewed the matters, and supported the report in its entirety. I believe it's a good bill. I'm sure the next generation can move things along. I think we've done what we can do at this point to carry the independence project a little farther along. I hope that the work of the committee serves the country well. I hope that these honors, when they come into being, will be widely accepted by the population as something which is conferred by their own countrymen on their own people. You know, the late Paul Adley went to his death refusing to accept even Queen's Counsel, because he said that that was a British honor, and he wanted to be conferred with an honor which was a Bahamian honor, and he was very strong with that. The former Governor General, the Honourable Arthur Hanna, would not accept a knighthood in the office of Governor General because he believes strongly that this was a country and a nation, or believes strongly that this is a country and a nation which he helped to create and build up. and leave to the next generation. And so men of that character and women of that character ought to be able to receive these honors from this generation as grateful thanks from a nation for all the work which they did to hand this country off to us. I said when I last spoke here, there is, in my view, just too much doom and gloom about too many things. And what we know about doom and gloom is that it never happens. You read the newspapers, and I know that they are selling newspapers, so it excites the imagination. It's like running to the obits on Thursday. You want to see who died. But the fact is, the nation isn't dying. The nation is surviving. And we have the cut and thrust, difficult times. There's some ups, there's some downs. But the trajectory is always upwards. And I commend this bill. And I say, as I said last time when I spoke, forward ever and backward never. Thank you.